Grace and peace to you. It's good to be with you again this month. Your promise word this month is Psalm 36, verse 9, which says, "For with you is the fountain of life, and in your light we see light." I want to focus mainly on the second half of that verse. In your light we see light. This is a follow-up to last month's promise word from Ephesians 1:18 about God opening our spiritual eyes. Now, when I think of that, I think about the story in John chapter 9 when Jesus heals a man who was born blind. It's an interesting story. Jesus heals him by making mud and putting it on the man's eyes and then telling him to wash. He washes his eyes and his eyes are opened. He sees for the first time in his life. And then that begins an exchange between he and the religious leaders who are the Pharisees, and they're upset that Jesus did this on the Sabbath, and there's this back and forth. And then we have this amazing scene at the end of the chapter where the former blind man is talking to Jesus, and Jesus says this. He said, I came that those who see will be blind, and that those who are blind will see. You see, the Pharisees thought they could see, but they were actually blind. And the man who was blind was the one who ended up being able to see. Saul was a Pharisee, and he, of course, persecuted the church, approved of the jail for the Christians, and even murder of Christians. And you know the story of Saul. He became Paul and became the great apostle. But on that road to Damascus, Jesus knocked him down with a light from heaven with his voice and blinded him for 3 days. Now, he was a Pharisee also, just like those men in John 9. And during that 3-day period, what was he doing? Well, he was reevaluating his whole life. Everything he thought he knew about God, everything he thought he understood about the Old Testament was completely changed and transformed. And now he was starting to see that Jesus was the center of it all. He was seeing for the first time in his life, even though he was blind. One of the things I like to say is that humility is God's work in us so that God can work in us. Humility comes from him. He gives it to us as we respond and receive it from him. And then that enables God to do even more work in us because God gives grace to the humble. God doesn't want us to be blind. He wants us to see. That means we need to come to him humble. We need to come to him hungry because it is in his light that we see light. I pray that this month God opens our spiritual eyes in new and exciting ways that we see him even more. May God richly bless you.